The first rule of living alone in a third-floor apartment is simple. If you wake up with a strange child sleeping on your chest, you do not scream until you know whether he can scream louder. Unfortunately, Evan Miller, had never been famous for making wise choices before coffee. My eyes snapped open at exactly 3:17 in the morning because something warm, heavy, and definitely not my weighted blanket was curled against me like I was a human pillow. For 3 full seconds, my brain tried to be helpful. Maybe it was laundry. Maybe it was my neighbor's cat. Maybe I had finally lost my mind after working back-to-back shifts at the children's sleep clinic and surviving on gas station coffee and frozen waffles. Then the little body on top of me sighed, tucked his face into my hoodie, and mumbled, "Safe." I stopped breathing. He was maybe 5, pale as moonlight, with messy white blonde hair, round cheeks, and a tiny black pajama set that looked more expensive than my entire apartment. A small gold crest was embroidered over his heart. I did what any responsible adult would do. I whispered, "Oh no," in the voice of a man whose life had just been politely pushed off a cliff. The boy's eyes opened. They were gold. Not hazel, not amber, not cute little cartoon gold. Actual alpha gold, glowing faintly in the dark room like 2 sleepy porch lights from a haunted mansion. He blinked at me, unimpressed, then grabbed the front of my hoodie with both tiny fists and pressed his forehead back against my chest. "No loud," he said. "Sleep." I stared at my ceiling fan, which rotated lazily as if it had no intention of helping me. "Buddy," I whispered, "I have several questions, and every single one of them is illegal." That was when my bedroom window slid open by itself. Not shattered, not slammed, just opened, smooth and silent, like my apartment had suddenly decided to become a luxury hotel for supernatural emergencies. Cold night air swept in, carrying the scent of pine, snow, and something old enough to have its own tax bracket. 5 men in black suits appeared on my fire escape. Appeared. As in, 1 second there was empty Brooklyn night outside, and the next there were 5. Very large alpha guards crouched respectfully outside my window like this was a totally normal Tuesday activity. I clutched the child against me on instinct. The boy grumbled, half asleep, and patted my shoulder as if I was the one needing comfort. The tallest guard lowered his head. "Mr. Miller," he said carefully, "please remain calm." That sentence has never once made anyone calm, I whispered. Another guard looked at the child in my arms, then immediately dropped to one knee. The others followed. My stomach sank. My soul packed a suitcase. The boy yawned against my hoodie. The tallest guard said, "Your Highness, we have been searching everywhere." I looked down at the tiny child drooling peacefully on my sweatshirt. Then I looked back at the kneeling men on my fire escape. "I'm sorry," I said, because apparently panic had turned me into a customer service representative. "Did you just call the kid in my bed Your Highness?" Before anyone could answer, the air changed. It deepened, pressed softer, went quiet in that impossible way cities never do. The guards straightened so fast they nearly became furniture. A shadow crossed the window, broad and still, and a man stepped into view behind them. Tall, pale, dressed in a dark coat despite the July humidity, with silver blonde hair pushed back from a face that looked carved out of winter and bad decisions. His eyes were the same gold as the boy's, only sharper, older, and fixed entirely on me. My heart did something humiliating. The child lifted his head, smiled sleepily, and said, "Papa." The man's gaze flicked to him, softened for half a second, then returned to me with the kind of focus that made my cheap room feel suddenly too small. "Evan Miller," he said, my name sounding dangerous in his mouth. "I am Damon Blackwood, Alpha King of the Northern Pack." I blinked once, twice. Then I pulled the blanket higher around both me and the royal child, currently using my hoodie as emotional support. "Okay," I said faintly. "I'm going to need coffee, an explanation, and possibly a lawyer." Damon Blackwood did not smile, but his son, the wild heir of an Alpha King, tucked himself closer to me and whispered, "Mine's safe." And that was the moment I realized the child in my bed had not gotten lost. He had come looking for me. Damon Blackwood entered my apartment through the window like that was a perfectly reasonable thing for royalty to do, and every survival instinct I owned immediately stood up, screamed, and hid behind the couch. He was too tall for my bedroom, too calm for the situation, and too clean for a man who had apparently arrived by fire escape at 3 in the morning. His dark coat brushed the floorboards, his gold eyes stayed on Noah, and his voice dropped into something low and careful. "Come here, son." Noah answered by turning his face into my hoodie and wrapping both arms around my neck. No, the room went silent. One of the guards outside made a small choking sound, like he had just witnessed the sun tell gravity to mind its business. Damon did not move, not even a little, but something in his face tightened, a tiny crack in the stone. "Noah," he said again, softer this time. "You scared half the palace." "Palace loud," Noah mumbled. "Evan quiet." My brain tripped over my own name. "I am sorry, he knows my name?" Damon's gaze shifted to me, and wow, being noticed by an alpha king felt a lot like standing in front of an oncoming snowstorm while wearing pajama pants with cartoon pancakes on them. "That is what I am trying to understand," he said. "My son has not slept more than 20 minutes at a time in 9 days. Tonight, he crossed 8 miles of secured packed territory, found this building, climbed to your window, and fell asleep on you in under 2 minutes." I stared at Noah. Noah yawned. "Very unhelpful." "I work at a sleep clinic," I said slowly, because apparently my mouth had decided facts were shields. "I help kids with nightmares, separation anxiety, sensory overload. I do not usually accept royal balcony appointments." Damon's eyes flicked around my room, taking in the thrift store dresser, the pile of laundry I had been pretending was a chair, the half-empty coffee cup on my nightstand, and the cracked phone charger held together with hope. His expression did not change, which somehow made it worse. "You are an Omega," he said. "Yes, and you are." Standing in my bedroom. "So we are both making discoveries." Behind him, one guard looked personally offended by my survival sarcasm. Damon ignored it. He stepped closer, slowly, palms visible, not reaching for me, not reaching for Noah, and that restraint did something strange to the air. He was powerful enough to order the entire room to move, but he did not. He only looked at his son like a man who had been awake for too many nights and had run out of ways to be afraid. "Noah," he whispered, "please." The little boy lifted his head. His gold eyes were heavy with sleep, but his tiny hand stayed fisted in my hoodie. "Evan, come too." "Buddy," I said gently, "I cannot just go with strangers, even extremely dramatic ones with royal cheekbones." Damon's eyebrow moved. "Barely. Unfortunately, I noticed." Even more unfortunately, my face got warm. Noah pressed his palm against my chest, right over my heart, and his breathing steadied like he was listening to music only he could hear. Damon noticed too. His nostrils flared once, not in anger, but recognition. "Your scent," he said. "What about it?" "Lavender," he murmured. "Vanilla. Rain." I froze. In normal society, people did not casually describe your scent in your bedroom at 3 in the morning unless they wanted to be removed by security, but apparently the security worked for him. Damon looked almost shaken now, and that scared me more than his crown ever could. "He followed your scent." I looked down at Noah, who had already started drifting again, safe and warm against me. Outside, the city kept humming like my life had not just cracked open. "So what happens now?" I asked. Damon's answer came quietly, but it landed like a door locking. "Now we find out why the heir of my pack thinks you are home." By 4 in the morning, I was sitting in the back of a black town car with a sleeping royal child in my lap, 2 alpha guards in the front seat, and the alpha king himself beside me looking like he had personally invented silence and found my breathing disrespectful. Noah had refused to let go of my hoodie, which meant I had been allowed exactly 6 minutes to put on sneakers, grab my wallet, and text my boss the least believable sick day message in American employment history. Something came up. Might be late. Possible monarchy issue. I deleted monarchy issue and sent stomach bug instead, because apparently I still had professional standards while being escorted across Brooklyn by people who bowed to a kindergartner. The city outside the tinted windows looked normal in the cruelest possible way. Streetlights. Closed delis. A man walking a tiny dog in a raincoat. Meanwhile, I had a prince drooling on my sleeve and an alpha king watching him like every breath was a miracle he did not trust. "Does he do this often?" I whispered. Damon did not look away from Noah. "Sleep? Escape heavily guarded royal property and break into apartments." His mouth tightened. "No, great. Wonderful. Love being a first." One of the guards made the mistake of glancing back. I gave him a look that said yes. "I am aware I am coping badly. Please return your eyes to the road." Damon finally turned toward me. Up close, without the drama of the window and the cold night air, he looked less like a legend and more like a man who had not rested in weeks. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes, a crease between his brows, and a carefulness around Noah that made my chest ache before I could stop it. "You are not in trouble, Mr. Miller," he said. "Evan," I corrected automatically, then immediately regretted sounding like we were exchanging names at a neighborhood cookout. And that is good, because I have done nothing except sleep in my own apartment with the terrible judgment of leaving a window unlocked. The window was locked. I stared at him. Please do not say things like that while I am trapped in a moving car. For the first time, something almost like amusement touched his eyes. It vanished so quickly I wondered if sleep deprivation had given me royal hallucinations. We crossed the river as dawn started turning the sky the color of watered-down peach juice. 30 minutes later, the car passed through iron gates taller than my apartment building and rolled up a long private drive lined with white stone wolves. The Blackwood Palace rose ahead of us, all glass, pale stone, and sharp rooftops. Cutting into the morning mist, I should have been impressed. I was, unfortunately, too busy realizing my hoodie had a peanut butter stain on it. Inside, the palace smelled like cedar, polished marble, and anxiety with a trust fund. Staff members froze as we entered. Some stared at Noah asleep against me. Others stared at Damon. A few stared at me like I had walked in carrying a small moon. A woman in a white medical coat hurried down the stairs, her silver hair pinned tight, her expression all business until she saw Noah breathing peacefully in my arms. Then her hand flew to her mouth. "He is asleep," she whispered. "Dr. Reeves," Damon said. "Explain." That was how I ended up in a private medical suite with warm lights, soft chairs, and more machines than my clinic could afford in a decade. Dr. Helena Reeves scanned Noah, checked his pulse, and asked me to sit very still while she waved a small silver device near my wrist. The device chimed once, then twice. Then it turned green. Everyone went quiet. I hated when rooms did that. "What does green mean?" I asked. "Green is friendly, right? Green means go. Green means vegetables people pretend to like." Dr. Reeves looked at Damon first, which I immediately did not appreciate. "His Grace was not wandering randomly," she said. "He was sent sleepwalking." My stomach dropped softly, like an elevator missing a floor. Damon went still, toward Evan. "Yes," she said. "Mr. Miller carries a rare omega scent profile. Stabilizing, soothing, particularly responsive to young alpha bloodlines under emotional distress." I looked down at Noah, who had curled one tiny hand around my thumb in his sleep. "So he smelled me from 8 miles away?" "Not exactly," Dr. Reeves said gently. "He sensed safety from 8 miles away." Damon's gaze landed on me, and this time it was not cold. It was worse. It was careful, stunned, and almost afraid. Noah sighed in his sleep and whispered, "Home." And every person in that room heard it. For one soft, impossible second after Noah whispered home, nobody moved, and I made the terrible mistake of thinking maybe the universe had finished embarrassing me for the morning. Then the palace doors opened. 3 more staff members rushed in. Someone called me the Omega. Someone else dropped a stack of towels, and I realized the universe was not finished. It had only been warming up. Damon raised one hand, and the room settled instantly. Not because he was loud. He was not. That was the frightening part. He could silence a dozen people with less effort than I used to silence my alarm clock. Dr. Reeves gently eased Noah onto a small bed, but the second my thumb slipped from his hand, Noah whimpered. Not cried, not screamed, just made one tiny broken sound that hit every adult in the room directly in the chest. Damon stepped forward at once. I did too. We both stopped. Our shoulders almost touched. His scent drifted near me, cedarwood and cold air, controlled so tightly it felt folded behind glass. Noah reached blindly, found my sleeve, and relaxed again. Dr. Reeves looked at Damon with the careful expression of a woman about to say something nobody rich wanted to hear. "He needs consistency, at least for now." I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because my sanity had apparently slipped on marble and was lying somewhere near the door. Consistency as in a bedtime routine, right? Warm milk, soft music, maybe one of those overpriced sleep lamps shaped like a turtle. Dr. Reeves did not smile. "Consistency as in you." I looked at Damon. Damon looked at Noah. Noah slept like a tiny angel who had not just turned my entire life into a federal incident. I have a job, I said. I have rent. I have exactly one houseplant depending on me, and it is already emotionally fragile. Damon turned toward me fully. Name your terms. Excuse me. You will not be kept here against your will, he said, each word measured. But I am asking you to remain at the palace for 30 days as Noah's sleep guardian. You would be paid. Your clinic would be compensated for your absence. Any personal expenses handled. If, at the end of 30 days, you want to leave, you leave. I wanted to say no immediately. I wanted to say I was not some magical blanket for royal children. I wanted to say that Damon Blackwood could take his perfect coat, his tragic eyes, and his indoor palace. Weather, and find another solution. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from the clinic director lit up the screen. Funding meeting moved up. If we do not secure help this month, we may have to close the children's program. My throat tightened. Of course. Of course the universe had brought receipts. Damon saw my face change, but he did not ask. That somehow made it worse. By breakfast, I had signed a 30-day contract at a table long enough to host Thanksgiving for a football team. My hoodie had been replaced by a cream sweater softer than any fabric had a legal right to be. Noah sat beside me, eating pancakes in sleepy silence, one hand still gripping my sleeve. Damon sat across from us, watching like he was trying to memorize peace before it disappeared. Then a maid walked in, froze at the sight of me beside the Heir, and whispered, "Is he the temporary consort?" My fork hit the plate. Damon closed his eyes. Noah smiled into his syrup. I leaned toward the nearest guard and said, "Please tell me consort means babysitter with dental insurance." No one answered fast enough. That was how I learned the palace had already decided I belonged to the king. By the end of my first official day as Noah's sleep guardian, I had learned 3 things about palace life. 1. Every hallway looked exactly the same if you were poor and emotionally overwhelmed. 2. Royal laundry smelled like clouds with money. 3. Noah Blackwood was not wild because he was spoiled. He was wild because he was terrified of closing his eyes. The palace kept trying to treat him like a future king in tiny pajamas, which was probably why he had bitten 3 silk pillows, hidden under a dining table, and refused every bedtime routine presented by people with clipboards. I found him at 8 that night in the West Nursery, perched on top of a bookshelf like a pale little gargoyle, clutching my old hoodie in both hands. Nobody had asked me before stealing it from my room, but apparently the palace had a flexible relationship with personal property when the Heir was involved. "Noah," I said gently, standing below him with my arms crossed. "Buddy, we do not climb furniture taller than a refrigerator unless we are a cat, a squirrel, or making very bad choices on a reality show." He blinked down at me. "Bed bad. Bed is not bad. Bed is just misunderstood. Dreams bad." That stopped me. Behind me, Damon stood near the doorway, silent in a black sweater, his presence filling the room without trying. The nurses had stepped back. The guards had stepped back. Everyone had stepped back except me, because apparently I had signed a contract and misplaced my common sense. I looked up at Noah again. "What do the dreams do?" Noah's small fingers tightened around the hoodie. "They take mama." The room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft collapse of breath, like every adult had been holding the same grief and nobody knew where to put it. Damon looked away first. It was only for a second, but I saw it. The Alpha King, the man people whispered about in marble halls, staring at the floor because his 5-year-old had said the one thing he could not fix. My chest hurt in a way I did not appreciate. I dragged a padded reading chair beneath the shelf and climbed halfway up, which was brave considering my personal relationship with balance could best be described as hostile. "Okay," I said. "Then we do not fight the dream. We change the ending." Noah frowned. "How?" "With a story. A very official, extremely scientific story. I work at a sleep clinic, so I am basically a dream mechanic." A tiny pause. "Dreams have cars. Only the dramatic ones." Noah considered this with grave royal seriousness. Then he slowly let me lift him down. The entire room acted like I had just performed brain surgery with a juice box. I carried him to the bed, sat beside him, and told him about a little wolf prince who got lost in a snowstorm but followed the smell of pancakes, lavender soap, and clean rain all the way home. Noah listened with one hand wrapped around my finger. Damon stayed by the door. He did not interrupt. He did not command. He only watched, and each time Noah's breathing softened, something in Damon's face softened too, piece by careful piece. When Noah finally fell asleep, his lashes resting on pale cheeks, the room remained still for a long moment. I eased my hand free and stood, only to realize Damon was looking at me like I had handed him back the moon. You spoke to him like he was a child, Damon said quietly. I blinked. He is a child. His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with something older and sadder. Most people forget that. I wanted to make a joke. I wanted to say something stupid about charging extra for dream mechanic services. Instead, I looked at Noah, then back at his father. Maybe you forgot too. The words landed before I could catch them. Every guard in the hall stopped breathing. Damon stared at me. For one terrifying second, I thought I had gone too far. Then he looked at his sleeping son and whispered, "Maybe I did." The next morning, the palace decided I needed to be introduced to the court, which sounded elegant until I realized court meant 80 strangers in designer suits staring at me like I was a suspicious salad at a barbecue. I had slept 3 hours in a guest room larger than my entire apartment. Woken up to Noah sitting on the rug beside my bed drawing wolves in purple crayon, and been dressed by 2 very polite attendants who kept saying things like seasonal formal wear and pack-appropriate presentation while I stood there wondering whether my socks matched. By 10, I was in the East reception hall wearing a pale blue sweater, dark slacks, and the expression of a man trying very hard not to trip on royal carpet. Damon stood across the room speaking with council members, all sharp lines and quiet command, while Noah stayed beside me with one hand tucked in my sleeve. "Do they always stare like that?" I whispered. Noah nodded solemnly. "They stare when Papa sneezes. That is a terrifying level of unemployment." He giggled, and the sound made 3 nearby nobles look offended, as if joy had violated palace policy. That was when a tall alpha with perfect blonde hair and a smile so polished it felt rented stepped in front of us. "Mr. Miller," he said, taking my hand before I could decide whether we were shaking. "Caleb Rhodes, senior advisor to the crown." His fingers closed a little too firmly around my wrist. Not painful, not dramatic, just possessive enough to make my skin prickle. Noah immediately went still. "You have caused quite a stir," Caleb continued. "A common omega appearing in the royal household overnight. People are curious. People could try crossword puzzles," I said. "Less invasive." Caleb smiled without warmth. "You are funny. That helps. Temporary favorites often need a skill." I felt Noah's small hand tighten on my sleeve. Before I could answer, the room cooled. Not in temperature exactly. More like every candle remembered who owned the air. Damon was suddenly beside me. He had crossed the entire hall so quietly that I was beginning to suspect kings were issued silent shoes at coronation. His gaze moved from Caleb's hand on my wrist to Caleb's face. "Release him." 2 words. No shouting. No threat. Still, Caleb let go so quickly my arm felt oddly light. Damon did not touch me. He did not step in front of me. He only stood near enough that his cedar and snow scent settled around Noah and me like a closed door. "Mr. Miller is here under my protection," Damon said. "More importantly, he is here by agreement. Speak to him with respect, or do not speak to him at all." Caleb bowed his head. "Of course, Your Majesty." When he walked away, my heart was beating too fast, which was annoying because nobody had given it permission to be dramatic. "I had that handled," I murmured. Damon looked down at me, and for once the frost in his eyes had cracked into something almost human. "I know. Then why did you come over?" His jaw worked once. Across the hall, Caleb joined a cluster of nobles, all of them whispering behind crystal glasses. Damon lowered his voice. "Because I wanted to make certain I did not handle it badly." That answer slipped under my ribs and sat there, warm and inconvenient. Noah leaned against my leg and yawned. "Evan safe?" he declared to no one in particular. Damon looked at his son, then at me. "Yes," he said softly. "He should be." I should have been relieved. I was. Mostly. But as the court watched us from every corner of the Golden Room, I realized the real danger was not that Damon Blackwood could protect me. It was that some quiet part of me had already started trusting him too. By the 3rd night, I had learned that palace rumors moved faster than group chats and twice as irresponsibly. By breakfast, I was Damon Blackwood's secret mate. By lunch, I had enchanted his son with forbidden Omega magic. By dinner, According to one maid who turned purple when I walked into the laundry room, I was carrying the future of the entire northern pack in my cardigan pocket. I missed my apartment. I missed my terrible mattress. I missed being judged only by Mrs. Alvarez downstairs, who thought my frozen dinners were a cry for help. At the palace, everyone watched me like I might either save the kingdom or spill soup on it. The strangest part was Damon. He never made the rumors worse. He never stood too close unless no one needed him to. He never used that quiet royal authority on me, even when I was being difficult, which was often, because being kidnapped by circumstance had made me spiritually itchy. That evening, after Noah fell asleep with one hand on my sleeve and a crayon drawing of 3 wolves tucked under his pillow, I went looking for tea and got lost in the West Wing. Again, the West Wing had too many portraits, too many identical doors, and one hallway that smelled faintly like lemons and generational wealth. I was about to admit defeat and ask a suit of armor for directions when voices drifted from the council chamber ahead. Caleb Rhodes spoke first, smooth as glass over ice. Your Majesty, this arrangement cannot continue. The boy is attached. The court is unsettled. Mr. Miller has become an emotional liability. My stomach dropped. Damon answered after a silence so long I counted my own heartbeat. Choose your next words carefully. With respect, Caleb said, sounding like a man preparing to be disrespectful. He is a common omega with unusual scent influence over the air. That is dangerous. Another voice joined in, female, crisp and elegant. The council recommends relocation after the next evaluation. A private estate. Comfortable, discreet, far from the child until the bond fades. My fingers went cold around the teacup I had apparently stolen from a side table. Relocation. Comfortable. Discreet. Rich people had an amazing talent for making terrible things sound like spa packages. Then Damon spoke, and his voice was so quiet I almost missed it. No, Your Majesty, Caleb pressed. If he refuses to leave, we can invoke emergency guardianship protections. The air changed. Even through the door, I felt it, not as pressure, but as a deep stillness. Damon did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Evan Miller is not property of this court. He is not a treatment. He is not bait for my son's stability. He signed a 30-day agreement, and if he chooses to walk out tonight, every gate in this palace will open for him. My throat tightened so fast it hurt. Caleb said nothing. Damon continued, and this time the frost in him cracked wide enough for grief to show. I will not teach my son that love means keeping someone who wants to leave. The words landed in me softly, painfully, like a key turning in a lock I had not known was there. I stepped back before they could hear me, but my heel caught the edge of a rug, because naturally my body chose that moment to betray both stealth and dignity. The door opened. Damon stood there, gold eyes finding me instantly. For a second, neither of us spoke. I held up the teacup. I was looking for chamomile, I said weakly. His gaze moved over my face, and I knew he knew I had heard everything. The kitchen is the other direction. That feels unnecessarily obvious now. Behind him, the council members stared. Caleb looked annoyed. The elegant woman looked curious. Damon stepped into the hall and closed the door behind him, shutting them away like weather. Evan, he said gently, you are free to leave. I should have felt lighter. Instead, I felt the terrifying weight of a choice that was finally mine. Down the hall, Noah's sleepy voice called my name from the nursery. Damon did not move toward me. He only waited. And somehow, the fact that he would let me go made staying feel more dangerous than leaving. I did not leave that night, which felt less like bravery and more like accidentally stepping onto a bridge before noticing how high it was. Noah had called for me in that small, frightened voice that turned every sensible thought in my head into soup, and Damon had stayed exactly where he was, giving me space even when his son was reaching for me. That was what ruined me. Not power, not the palace, not the way every room seemed to hold its breath when he entered. It was the fact that Damon Blackwood could have asked, could have ordered, could have rapped the whole world in royal language until my choice disappeared, and instead he stood in the hallway with tired gold eyes and let me decide. So I went to Noah. I sat beside his bed, told him the Wolf Prince story again, and pretended not to notice Damon standing outside the nursery door like a ghost who had forgotten how to come home. By morning, the palace had become too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, planning quiet, the kind of quiet that made my skin itch between my shoulders. Dr. Reeves arrived after breakfast with a gentle smile and a small case of silver bottles. A routine sin evaluation, she said, but her eyes did not match her voice. Noah was in the garden with his tutor. Damon had been called into an emergency council meeting. Convenient. Horribly convenient. I looked at the bottles, then at Dr. Reeves. Please tell me those are not expensive essential oils with political consequences. Her hand tightened around the case. Evan, I was instructed to administer a temporary scent blocker. It would only last a few hours. My stomach went cold. Instructed by Damon? She looked away. That was answer enough. I stood too fast, bumping my knee on the table with the grace of a newborn deer at a job interview. No. The council believes it will help determine whether Noah's attachment is natural or dependent. He is 5, I said, my voice shaking. He is not a science fair project. Dr. Reeves closed the case slowly. I know. Before either of us could move, Caleb Rhodes appeared in the doorway with 2 attendants and that polished smile I now wanted to throw into the nearest decorative fountain. Mr. Miller, the council has arranged a quiet suite in the East Tower for your comfort during the test. That is a fascinating way to pronounce absolutely not. Caleb's smile thinned. You agreed to palace medical supervision. I agreed to help Noah sleep. I did not agree to be tucked away like a confusing family secret. He stepped aside, gesturing down the hall. No one touched me. No one threatened me. That almost made it worse, how politely they tried to turn my fear into procedure. I walked because refusing in a hallway full of staff felt like making Noah's life harder, and apparently I had developed a tragic talent for caring about people who lived in castles. The East Tower suite was beautiful. Of course it was. Pale curtains, soft chairs, a view of the gardens, and a door that clicked shut with the calm finality of a decision made by other people. My scent felt muted within minutes, not gone, just wrapped in cotton. I pressed a hand to my chest and whispered, Okay, Evan, not panic. We are not panicking in Rich Prison. Then, far below, Noah cried my name. The sound was faint, but it cut straight through the walls. I ran to the window. In the garden, Noah stood frozen beneath a white tree, his tutor helpless beside him. Damon reached him seconds later, kneeling in the grass, hands open, voice too distant to hear. Noah shook his head and looked up at the tower. At me. My heart cracked. Behind me, the door opened. Damon stood there, breathing hard, his expression colder than winter and somehow more frightened than angry. Caleb was behind him, pale and silent. Damon did not look away from me. Did they give you a choice? He asked. I swallowed. They gave me a nice room. His jaw tightened. Then he turned to Caleb and said, very softly, Leave. The hallway emptied. Damon stepped inside, but stopped several feet away, as if he still feared becoming another locked door. I am sorry, he said. I should have protected your choice before they tried to dress control as concern. My throat burned. Noah needs me. Damon's eyes softened. Yes. A pause. And I need to know that you are here because you want to be. Down in the garden, Noah called again. I walked past Damon toward the open door. This time, no one stopped me. And when Damon followed, quiet and careful at my side, I realized the palace had tried to hide me away to weaken whatever was growing between us. But all it had done was show me exactly who would open the door. By the time I reached the garden, Noah was standing under the white tree with both hands clenched in my stolen hoodie, trying very hard to be brave and failing in the quietest way possible. That was somehow worse than tears. Tears would have been simple. Tears had instructions. This was a 5-year-old prince holding himself still because the entire palace had taught him that future kings did not fall apart where people could see. I slowed before I reached him because the scent blocker still wrapped my chest like cold cotton, and I did not want to scare him with something wrong. Hey, buddy, I said softly. I heard somebody ordered one emergency dream mechanic. Noah looked up. His gold eyes were wet. You went gone. I got misplaced by adults with terrible communication skills. Behind me, Caleb made a sound like he wished dignity could erase him from the lawn. Damon said nothing. He stayed several feet away, hands at his sides, giving Noah room, giving me room, giving everyone proof that power did not have to fill every empty space. Noah took one tiny step toward me, then another. The blocker was fading now, little by little, lavender and rain returning to the air between us. When he reached me, he pressed his forehead against my stomach and breathed in like he had finally found the path back to his own body. Safe, he whispered. I crouched carefully and wrapped my arms around him. Yes, I said, because for once I wanted the word to be true for both of us. Safe. The whole garden exhaled. Dr. Rees wiped at her eyes and pretended she had allergies. 3 guards looked at the roses with suspicious intensity. Damon lowered his head, and when Noah reached one hand toward him, he came immediately, kneeling in the grass beside us without caring who saw. Noah grabbed his father's sleeve with one hand and my sweater with the other. No tower, he mumbled. Damon's voice broke so softly most people would have missed it. I did not. No tower. Then he looked at me. No locked doors. Not for you. Not ever. Later, in the council chamber, Damon placed my contract on the table and rewrote it in front of everyone. 30 days became my choice, renewable only by me. Evaluations required my consent. My room would stay mine, my phone would stay mine, and every gate on palace grounds would open if I asked to leave. Caleb looked as if he had swallowed an entire lemon. Your Majesty, this gives Mr. Miller unusual influence. Damon did not blink. No, it gives him basic freedom. If that feels unusual to this council, then we have found a real problem. I should not have smiled. I absolutely smiled. That night, Noah fell asleep in his room after 2 stories, 1 cup of warm milk, and a very serious negotiation about whether stuffed wolves needed bedtime snacks. Damon walked me to the corridor afterward. He handed me a small silver key on a blue ribbon. This opens the garden gate, the east gate, and the private entrance by the river. I stared at it in my palm. You are giving me escape routes? I am giving you proof, he said. If you stay, I want it to be because staying feels like a door you chose, not one I closed. My heart did something soft and reckless. You know, I said, trying to sound normal and failing heroically. Most people flirt with flowers. Damon's mouth curved, just barely. It was not a full smile, but it was close enough to ruin my evening. I will remember that. I looked down the hall, where Noah's nightlight glowed like a little moon through the cracked nursery door. 3 days ago, I had been a tired omega in a tiny Brooklyn apartment with 1 sad plant and no royal complications. Now I had a key to a palace, a child who trusted me with his nightmares, and a king who looked at me like my answer mattered more than his crown. I closed my fingers around the key. I am not promising forever, I said. Damon nodded. I am not asking for forever. His voice softened. Only for tomorrow, if you want it. From the nursery, Noah mumbled in his sleep. Evan home. I looked at Damon. Damon looked back, quiet, patient, and no longer trying to hide how much hope hurt him. So I stepped past him, opened the nursery door, and sat beside Noah until his breathing settled. Damon stayed in the doorway for a moment, then lowered himself to the floor outside like a guard dog with a crown he was tired of wearing. I rested my hand near Noah's pillow, close enough for comfort, free enough to choose. The heir had followed my scent through the city because he needed safety, but his father had opened every door because he understood love was not a cage. And somewhere before sunrise, while the palace finally slept around us, I realized I was not trapped in Damon Blackwood's world anymore. I was standing at the edge of it, holding the key and choosing to stay.